Good morning. Hello, and welcome to Trust and Estates Weekly. I'm your host, Kevin Bemmel, and we are here every Monday at 10 a.m. Pacific time. And on the East Coast, it's already 1 o'clock in the afternoon. And I'm really happy to bring back Hillary Cooper, my guest from a few months ago. Hillary is the president of Uncluttered. And if you saw our first episode, you'll recall that Hillary helps you simplify your life, whether it's from a situation where someone has passed away and now you've got storage rooms or a house filled with stuff, or whether it's some other transition point in your life. And so Hillary and I have been talking about this for a while, kind of doing some on-site shows. And so today, Hillary is at Robin's Antiques in Midtown Manhattan. And Robin's Antiques is owned by Robin Rafimayeri. And Robin has been in the antiques business for 31 years. He's really deeply, deeply knowledgeable about the value of the kind of things that you find, the stuff, as we called it in the title of this episode, that you look at it and you go, wow, this looks old and it looks valuable, so it must be worth some money. And so I'm really happy that Hillary is going to kind of take us through and help us understand the stuff that we think is valuable. I mean, is it really? And it's not so easy to find out. So Hillary, thank you for coming on the show today, first of all.
Thank you for having me again, Robin. I know we have a series of shows coming up, and this was sort of the kickoff to the fall, the clean storage units, and the kickoff to our fall
Yeah,
series.
exactly. I think we have three show. We planned a three-show thing, if I recall correctly. So Robin, I'm Robin. We're calling each other Robin. Hillary,
Thanks.
when confronted with this, just like a storeroom full of stuff, right? What do we do in terms of finding the things that may have value? And for a moment, talk, if you would, about not just monetary value, but other kinds of value, so we can kind of start sifting through this, and then we can get to the area where you bring in Robin's expertise, from the strictly financial side.
Yeah, no, for sure. So I am often hired to be the first, the sort of boots on the ground, first person that goes in to sift through items that people have received, usually through someone passing or just an inheritance of whatever, right? And it's usually in a storage unit. And I say that because I live in Manhattan and my business is based in New York City. So a lot of people just don't have the actual physical space. If you're lucky to have a storage unit in the basement of your building, or you have just a very large closet space and you've created, rooms to, or a space within a room to antiques and silver and china. So we usually start with the smaller items first. A lot of people can easily keep that. The larger items, your grandparents, wonderful clock, or like the chest that's behind me or something like that, you would probably, that would probably be the last thing to get rid of. You probably, sort of store that in a storage unit versus keeping it in your apartment. So I think silver is probably the first. I mean, Robin wanted to give me some props today, so I know I can actually call on him to speak if there's any other questions. But so, for example, this, they call it the loving cup, yes, and it has the trophy cup loving cup. So it is a combination of a couple of things. People usually end up with items like this, whether it's a knickknack from a family Passover Seder or Rosh Hashanah or something like that, where their grandmothers have, passed it down to their mothers and now to them, or it's just sort of, one more thing to keep in a shelf and whether or not you're actually going to use it. But the interesting thing about this, and again, it's all about the stamp on the bottom. I know that's not possible to see on camera, but that's the first thing that we look for, is to be sure that it's sterling, that it's not plate, that it's. And then after that, obviously, it's the eye value. You could put this up in a New York City dining room or living room or something, everybody would say, wow, conversation piece. It's also small enough to keep. So that's a perfect example of how we go through the first round of items. Silver chests are another thing that have been handed down.
Sorry, before you go on to the next one, you mentioned the stamp on the bottom that identifies it as sterling. Is it stamped sterling? Is that what we're looking for, or
Says sterling. A lot of times that I've noticed with I bought in when I bought in Robin, things are silver plated. They're not real silver. So there's a huge value difference between silver and silver plate. So that's the first step, is to be sure that it's actually stamped. I mean, not to say that silver plate doesn't have its own version of value, but it's nowhere near the cost factor.
okay?
And there's Robin is chiming in about the different types of silver. Come in, right, join us,
Yeah, come on in, Robin.
Robin. To make it very specific, as I always bring Robin to that point. Go ahead, Robin.
Hi.
Hi. Thanks for joining us, Robin.
Silver, not all silver is marked sterling. European silver can be 900, 800, 750, so 84. So there's different versions of sterling silver out in the in the world. So
And what does that mean? 800, 900? Just real quick.
the purity of the silver. So it's
Okay.
800,000. 925 is basically American, and that's 925 out of 1,000. Japanese is 950. They all have different, I guess, grades, you could say.
Okay. And so it's actually not pure silver. It's silver mixed with some other metal. Is that it?
They put a little bit of, there's some copper in them, but very, very little.
Okay.
What's the that we've seen? I'm trying to think. Common grade of silver that we've seen.
It's probably 925, which is American. The Italians did it also. The Italians did a lot with 800 silver. So
Okay.
a lower grade, but still has a lot of value.
Okay. Yeah, I know I've got silver that's, 925. That number resonates with me. And I think sometimes it's even stamped on it, isn't it? That's 925?
Usually American silver stamped, unless it's something really, really early. There's the English marks, which they don't put a number on. English silver has what it's called a lion, and has two other import and city marks, which kind of gives you the realm of where that's from.
Okay.
But same content of 925.
Okay. Great. Good. So, okay, so we've got the loving cup or the trophy cup. And you were just starting to say something about a chest of silver?
Sometimes that's another common one that I come up with. People that have actual full chests of silver that their families have handed down through generation, and again, might be something that they just bring out once or twice a year for a holiday. But that seems to be the item that most people's kids don't want. That's why the trophy cup might be something that you could pass off to your 25-year-old when they have their first apartment, or when your children get married, or anything of those moments where they're actually looking to decorate, that they would take. A chest of silver is a much harder sell. It's a much harder item to gift, because with it comes a responsibility. Silver has to be polished, and it's also large, and it's heavy. So a lot of times, family silver that makes the most sense to keep is something like a cup or a silver tray or serving utensils, because at least that you can have some sort of memory of family holidays with a wonderful fork and knife and a spoon, or a cake cutter, something like that. But the days of anybody in their 20s or 30s wanting to use silver on a daily basis are really over. I mean, I think it's really a bygone generation.
Okay, well, so thank you for making me feel old.
No,
Because I use silver every day.
hardly.
I have 3 sets of silver that my older sister gave me that belonged to my Bobby, my paternal grandmother, and I use one of them for the Sabbath, and I have 2 that I sort of use back and forth for every day. And I of course it's just me, so I shine them up, and I just love how there's you can make them so shiny. And I mean, there's no point in me running a dishwasher because it's just me. So
Well, if you can, and again, because I guess the difference is that you live in Beverly Hills, so you have space. But when your kitchen is, 8 feet by 6 feet, every inch counts. It's the same thing when I look at people's closets and they try to decide what they should, keep and what they should get rid of. It's every hanger has real estate value and intrinsic real estate, as does everything in your kitchen. So how many things are you able to keep before you end up in New York City, a storage unit? I mean, minimum price is a few $100s a month if you want to be on the island of Manhattan, where it's
Mhm.
actually accessible to you. If you go outside
Right.
Long Island City or New Jersey, Brooklyn, Queens, it's a little bit less. But then again, people forget what they have in storage units. So if keeping, maintaining something or just being responsible for it becomes a
Mhm.
chore, that's not going to be the kind of thing that you're going to use on a daily basis.
So, and it occurs to me, I think my daughter, for example, she is much less stuff oriented than I am, and I got this from my mother, right?
Mm.
And so, like, if you came to my home, you would see I have a formal library set up with, I think, close to 4,000, books in it. I do have, silver pieces and all of that. Um, do you see the desire to hang on to these things and discard them to be trends that change over time, or do you think this is a more permanent trend toward people wanting to live maybe smaller, simpler lives? How do you see that issue?
No, that's a great question, Kevin. I definitely see it's not just a trend, but it's an absolute lifestyle change that people are looking to streamline. The Marie Kondo set off a chain of different opportunities for other authors to jump on the bandwagon, and Swedish death cleaning and all of that.
Mhm.
There is definitely 1,000% without, and I don't know what would cause people to go back to collecting. I don't see it. I really believe it's bygone generation. And I have seen everything from pen collections to stamp collections to coin collections, and people hold on to items because they're not sure if they have any value. But like you just said something, it resonated with me about your 4,000 books, your formal library. What it is actually leaving your daughter a huge responsibility to downsize that your home and to downsize your library. I've taken on in the last year a fair number of seniors as clients, and the responsibility is such that their kids, you're in your 80s and you've had a home for 50, 60 some odd years, and you're in your 80s or 90s, your kids are in their 50s or their 60s. And then the responsibility falls on your shoulders when you move, whether it's to, an assisted living or just to a smaller apartment or just to be closer to your family. Who knows, people, as we all move so much around in New York City, very commonplace to want to take an apartment someplace else, but you leave that responsibility to your family members, and that is there's no other word for it. It's daunting. you
Mhm.
know not I mean, it's hard enough to move. They say it's one of the most stressful things that one can do, and then you add to it a volume of things that have to be let go somehow, some way. So with those 4,000 books, sure, could I call in an expert to go through the items and find the ones that the binding is perfect and it's a collector's item or something? Sure, absolutely. And I'm sure that you've curated a great collection in your time, but most likely, more than not, probably that's only about 10% if you're lucky of the items that are in that library. The rest of it are books that you've probably read and that you've enjoyed, and maybe there's paperbacks in there as well. But these are things that have no resale value. I joke I'm 90% unlicensed therapist, 10% unclutterer, because everybody feels such a passion for all the items that they've held onto. But there's a psychology to it, hence the book that's coming out, The Story is Stuff. Everybody needs to feel that what they have is valuable, but also to know when it's time to let go.
Mhm. So, going back to the issue of people permanently downsizing. So, I would think then that let's take silverware, meaning silverware, silver plate or sterling silverware. Um, what the fact that people just don't want to have it anymore, how is that impacting then the market for these items that you someone may inherit, and now they've got a chest of I don't know, Rogers 1847, sterling silver, and it's a complete, service for 8 or service for 12, right? It would seem like something like that would be quite valuable, but it would. But if there's no market for it, then should it be melted down, or what would one do?
No, good question, Robin. You could probably speak to that as well. The idea of silver, do you melt it down? The idea of what actually, like,
So the problem with silver now is that the price of silver has gone up. So with silver right now, there is no middle. The lower end and the middle are silver value of melt value, but the very higher end stuff that's really good has some merit. But you're seeing more and more every day that people are melting more, and the way the economy's going, gold and silver are going to shoot up to crazy highs. So, sometimes if you wanted, let's say 500 for something, the melt value is 550, 600. It's just much easier and more sustainable than holding on, waiting. But silver right now, a lot of people don't want to use it because they don't want to have to clean it. Their kids they don't want to clean it. So, but it still has, inherent value, and you can sell it, can bring a lot of money depending on what you have. There are things that are $30 an ounce. I mean, $20 an ounce. There are things that are 3,000 and 4,000 an ounce. So everything kind of goes with depending on what it is. Yeah, it fluctuates. It just depends on quality, how early it is, who made it. It's all about who made it, really, and quality.
I see. And over time, I mean, do you see, so for example, with silver coins, right? One of the big issues is a lot of them were melted down previously, right? Which decrease the supply of those that remain in existence, right? Do you see a similar thing happening among other types of silver articles, so that in the end, all we're really left with is the I don't know the top silver designers, but I see in the Wall Street Journal they'll advertise a chest of silver for it's like $50,000. It must be some recognized designer, I assume.
This comes up all the time, and I've answered this, and I also asked the same question. I think between 5 to 7 years from now, you'll see a real shortage of nice looking silver. The really important will stick around, because within the next 6 months, 2 years, silver could go up so high that it will be foolish not to get rid of it, because you'll never get that price again. About 9 silver hit 49 and change. It was like an all-time high. And I think it's going towards that within the next 6 months to a year. What happens is that with coins, on the other hand, coins, a lot of people are buying coins because it's easy to store. It's not a big piece of silver. It's easy to handle. Or you're just going right into the commodities market and you're buying this, it's like a stock. But it all really depends on the way, like, some people like to look at it. Some people like to use it. It's not like it used to be back in the day where people had like sterling silver flatware sets and they ate on them. Nobody does. Even at my house, my family, friends, everyone uses stainless steel pretty much, to be honest with you. And that's it. You'd be surprised as to what people are keeping or not they're not keeping. Nobody wants to go silver anymore. It's a shame, but it's the truth. But you'll see a big decrease in the next few years. You'll see very good. And then to manufacture and to mine silver right now it's really expensive. There was a huge article out that the government wants to go green, but they can't go green because it costs over $100 an ounce just to mine silver. Silver is right now a little under $30 or $30. If you do the math, why is it at $30? It could really rise. So there's all kinds of different perspectives. It's also a very big manipulated market by the three biggest commodity companies in the world. Just basically manipulate it. They do what they want with it.
So besides the intrinsic value of silver, I mean, and this is why I still use silverware. There's a beauty to it. At least I think that stainless steel flatware just can't match. For Heather, both you and Robin, how are people looking at the beauty of these things that they might that they might inherit? So I'll give you an example. My grandfather, he has an actual loving cup. It was given to him by, I forget what organization it was, when he was a macher in La Crosse, Wisconsin. I'm pretty sure it's silver plate, right? And it's not in perfect condition, but it still sits, in on the center of the mantle of my fireplace, because it's so beautiful. It connects me to my zeta, and even if it didn't, even if it wasn't his, if somebody offered to me, I think I would take it, because it's so beautiful, and I appreciate beautiful things. So
And
how is that playing out these days?
that's where I come in as the uncluttered expert. Less is more. If your grandfather's cup was alongside a mantle with 15 other items that, excuse me, that were not as beautiful, or maybe just, just bigger, smaller, what have you, that it would take away, it would detract from that loving cup's importance. So I think that's where it's absolutely necessary. And the reason why people come to me and to my team for exactly that. What do we keep? What do we get rid of? Because you can't keep everything. And once you start trying to keep everything, it gets lost in the shuffle. And then you go back to the streamlining of a home prior to a sale, which is something that Robin and I have done a couple of times together. You have to move, and you need to reduce your belongings.
Mhm.
So if you're going to put this everything is so valuable on every item, you are never going to be able to accomplish that. I this is what I come up with over and over again. That's, again, the psychology of letting go. That it's okay. Do things still serve you with joy? Okay, yes. But how many of those items really are necessary? How much of it really serves you with joy? That one loving cup, because it has a story behind it, that should stay on your mantle. If I was with you going through, I would also have you take a really hard look at those 4,000 books, because I am guessing that out of those 4,000 books, there's probably 100 or 200 that really are important to you to keep. And if you were to sell your house and downsize, those books would have to go. Um, but the silver, it's just a piece or two. It also brings Robert and I, we pulled out a piece of Lalique glassware. And
Oh,
that's an item that I think people really tend to, sort of inherit, of our generation, and look at, and sort of say, like, when am I gonna use this? So a couple of pieces, sure. Do you keep those in your cupboard for Jewish holidays, again, Christmas, Thanksgiving? Absolutely. But again, big platters, they don't really serve a purpose in today's life. So the Lalique stuff, again, great name, great brand, it's all recognizable and resellable, but better to downsize when the need is not urgent than to wait until it is. And that's, like the key to everything in life. You don't want to wait until it's an absolute must. You want to do it preemptively. And even if it's streamlined a bit, between now and the time that it's urgent, at least just start, every year, to take a hard look at what's going on in your kitchen cabinets, to really think about, are you still doing Thanksgivings for 16 people, or are you now down to 8, or do you travel for Thanksgiving, or does your lifestyle lead you to going to a restaurant instead? Where really are you at that point in your life? Because again, this is a very what we do at Uncluttered is very physically demanding, as Robin can attest to. Everything is very heavy, and valuable items need to be packaged properly, and wrapped up and insured if you're sending them places. So there's so much there that you have to consider. And I really, start off at piles. That's usually the first job. The absolute must keep, the absolute, 1000% heirloom family items. Your loving cup would go in there, and then you would go on to the next level. Okay, so if I could sell these and get something for it, I would. And then, the final is, the donation. And how do I give? I have a great collaboration with Goodwill, and that's another one that I think that people underestimate the value of actually donating something and feeling so good about the fact that it's going to have a second life. But that's sort of the third category. But just to get rid of things. Things just cause anxiety. Too much stuff just causes anxiety. That's
So, so
yes.
you mentioned you have a Lalique platter.
Now, Robin, do you want
Why
to?
don't, let's take a look at it. Well, Robin is getting that. In defense of my library, it's highly curated. So, and I'm actually trying to figure out whether I want to donate it to an institute that does the kind of research that I do. So, but it's an interesting thought. So,
No,
okay. Oop. Oh, unfortunately, I lost. We lost Hillary and Robin. So we'll hang tight here for a minute or two and see if they log back on. I'm going to send her a text message, and let's see if she logs back in. Hopefully, it wasn't her phone battery that died, and she's not able to come back on. But so just kind of summarizing what Hillary and Robin and I were talking about, and I right there at the end, I think that's the important thing is there's the three layers of stuff. So there's the top layer of I'm keeping this because it's a family heirloom. It resonates to me. Whether it has value or not whether it has monetary value or not is immaterial. Like my grandfather's loving cup, and then there's the next tranche down, which is, does this have some kind of monetary value? Can it be sold? And the money gotten for it, and now you've got the money. And the third is then what can be donated to. Hillary used the example of goodwill, but I think there may be other opportunities for donating things. So there's so many charitable organizations out there. There are also universities and academic organizations. So, for example, oh, here we go. She came back.
It's a little technical difficulty with a too hot phone. I think somebody's trying to tell me that I'm no, sorry. So where we left off, I apologize for that, but
Yeah, no problem.
it's the Lalique. We're looking at glassware that people tend to also just want to keep very few pieces, and we can talk about the beauty of this and the etching, but you don't need a lot. Again, I keep going back to this is the principle on which Uncluttered was founded. It's to be able to help you streamline your items. And you have to do this at certain junctures in your life. You have to do it when you move out for the first time, your first post college apartment. You have to do it again when your kids leave. You have to do it yet again when you move. You have to do it yet again when your parents move. Whether whether you're moving to a bigger house, and even with a bigger house, and again, I have this with clients too. You don't want to take all of the items from your prior house with you when you get divorced. My life transitions, with my on my website. If you take a look, uncluttered.me, you'll see all of my different lists. People, corporate relocations, we help people through that transition as well. I move from one part of the country to another, and just you might want to, just less is more lifestyle, period, end of story. But that's what Uncluttered is all about.
And so the Lalique platter you have, how would one know? First of all, I mean, I've heard of Lalique,
Yeah.
but I don't think I could identify it. So with silver, right, we can look and see if it's stamped. Oftentimes, the maker will be stamped. On crystal and glassware, how do we know if something has any kind of value?
It's
most
signed,
glass,
right?
most glass is signed.
Yeah.
Like this piece is signed Renee Lalique. It's our Lalique, and it's on the back here.
Oh,
It's going to be really hard for me to show
That's not going to show up on camera.
because I'm glass, but it's usually bottom. This is our Lalique. which is a little bit older and better, but it really goes behind like what you use it for. Is it in the way? Are you going to use it? Do your kids want it? That's when I think Hillary comes in and kind of can come in and break it down for you and tell you she might need some help, or we can help her. But her main goal, which she's very good at, is like getting things organized, and that's what she does.
And then it's the streamlining process. I have a list of experts. Robin, of course, the number one guy, but also for, like I said, pen collections, for stamp collections, for Robin's great with coins and that kind of stuff. But there's jewelry. I work with a jeweler that very often will have bring a chest of jewelry to my jeweler, and we'll say, hey, we remember our mothers wearing these things, but they're not modern, so we repurpose jewelry, we redesign items, we use the same stones, but we put them in a different setting, that kind of thing. So that's another service. Again, with furniture, sometimes you get yourself into trouble. You think that the dumb sofa that you spent $6,000 on is going to be worth $2,000 when you go to resell it. Now, most likely that sofa will cost you $1,200 to get out of your apartment. So we're very transparent. We tell you what we think you should hold on to and what we really think you should get rid of, and help you through the process. And again, too much stuff just causes anxiety. And so the story of stuff coming out in early 2025.
So here, this question is actually more for Robin. As people stop using all these things, how will you stay in business? I mean, just to put it bluntly, right? If people don't want, big glass platters and silver trays and all that, so right, your whole business is, buying these things and reselling them. So what happens to a business like yours, or how is your business changing? Because that will affect those of us who administrate estates, right? As we look at all these things and we bring Hillary in to help us, declutter a client, right? And now we're saying, well, okay, now we're going to hand it over to Robin. What are you going to do with all this stuff?
It's like a cycle. You have your generation who used it for 20, 30, 40, 50, 60 years. Now they're, downsizing, decluttering, they're giving it to their kids. Or, there are still people that are buyers that are at an older age. But you will find that it's like a cycle. Then you get the younger generation starting to buy these things and going on. It's like a cycle. It's like the older, they downsize, then the younger, who's just starting out, buying and decorating and supplying their house. It's like a big wheel that goes around.
Yeah, it's what we're calling the silver tsunami right now, where our population is getting older quicker than we are having children, and also the phenomenon of single children, an only child, is coming back into being. Where people realize that it's just maybe they're concerned about the state of the world. They're having one child and not two or three, or they have children later, and they just want to live in a major metropolitan city, and that's cost prohibitive. Space is always, but again, Uncluttered was built on this. I've moved many times in my 10 years since my divorce, and my kids were young, and you learn how to say goodbye to things, and you embrace the journey. So that, again, Story of Stuff is all about that. But truly, there's the most important thing is that one of the most important things is that you don't have great anxiety that you're leaving too much behind. I've seen things. I mean, Collier brothers kind of hoarding crazy stuff where, kids that are in their 50s don't have the time to do it, and have to hire, thankfully, somebody like me that they can trust to go through a big house or storage units and all the like, or multiple homes. I've done that as well, where we're the trusted advisors.
Yeah, you also have, if you notice, if you ever have sold your house and you're moving on to something smaller or different, you'll see the realtors are telling you to completely go crazy and move this, get rid of this. There's too much of this. There's too much of that. You'll see that people, when they look at homes too, they also want to see them very sparse.
Absolutely.
So that's another thing.
Absolutely. That's I think our main, they want to be staged by the realtor, and you cannot sell a home. I mean, you can't go to closing, as I'm sure you can't go to closing if there's items left in the house. So it all has to be gone. And, to do it preemptively before you list your home to sort of streamline it is the best possible way to get top dollar for your property.
So I there's I'm thinking of kind of a maybe a metaphor, if you will. So it going into the world of clothing, um, you see all these sort of fast fashion brands, right? Where the clothing is very cheap. It's not very well made. It's maybe designed to last for, a season or a year or maybe two, and then be thrown away and on to kind of the next thing. And one of the things I've seen, and I know I've talked to my daughter about this because, um, you know, being the age that she's a teenager, that sort of fast fashion thing is very popular, I think, with teenagers. And what I've tried to stress to her is, you're better off buying a few classic garments that are very well made. They are going to be much more expensive, but they'll last for 5, 10, 15, 20 or more years. I mean, I know I have clothing in my closet that I think dates back to the 90s. Now, in some cases, I've had it recut so it looks more current. But in terms of its functionality, it's still in good condition. It still looks great. It's still, if thank goodness it fits still 30 years later, right? So I now see, I look at possessions the same way. So rather than having a bunch of cheap glassware, for example, I want to have a few pieces, very nice things that are beautiful. Now I like old things because I do, but how does that sense of the value of things versus the sort of throwaway nature of so much of things, how do you see that?
I think you're talking about a couple of different topics that are all really important and dear to my heart. I just hope that my phone doesn't overheat and cut us off. But I'll give you about a minute on all of the above. The first part of the fast fashion idea, which, I have a 17-year-old daughter who mostly only thrifts. That is the way that she has deleted the Shein app off and the Timo app off of her phone. There has been an occasional Brandy Melville, I'm not going to lie, but less and less after the expose, the Netflix expose came out about him. But it's definitely the trend for young people that are wise, that are just really staying current, is to thrift. It is to find items through flea markets and all of these wonderful shops all over Brooklyn and what have you, actually all over the world. We're thrifting in Paris, or going to the flea markets is the number one hotspot. But it's so wonderful to be the one person that has something when you walk into a room. If you fast fashion all the time, you will inevitably bump into some at a party. And again, this is the mindset of a 16, 17, 18-year-old girl, 20-year-old girl, what have you, that you're going to be wearing the same thing as one of your friends. And prior to Uncluttered, I was a stylist. So I did all of the same exact thing, and I rebranded my business and thought that this is the next thing, because people come to me to get rid of items. So when I was in their closets, they were also asking me about their homes. And it, became a perfect segue to doing what it is that I currently do with Uncluttered. But it's absolutely that. I mean, you see the waste, you see what goes on in landfills. I was driving down in Boca Raton, Florida last week, and I was like, where, what is this? And there's huge, must have been, I am not kidding, Kevin, 30 acres of a landfill. I mean, it was man-made mountains. I know it's awful. Truly, truly, if I could have stopped at the traffic light and cried, I would have. And you see these, sort of artificial greenery over these land, and these trucks that are climbing over. I mean, mountains. I am not kidding. They are green. They are green ski mountains. I mean, this is in the lift to get up to the top of them, and you would consider that a green. Heartbreaking, absolutely heartbreaking. And when you see what goes on in our oceans as well, and you have any sort of an idea of like, why it's so warm out in September? Why do we not have snow in New York anymore? Especially you in California, your wildfires, all the climate change that we're going through is all absolutely directly related to this. So if, Uncluttered could help you do a little tiny bit of good for the world, it's my pleasure to be able to do it. But yeah, it does start with the generation now that are hopefully accumulating less because they see the anxiety that accumulation does, and on top of it, what it does to our world. And that's really the crux, I think, of what you were trying to ask.
Very good. Well, so you know what? I think we're going to stop here. We're actually at the 40-minute mark. I want to reiterate something that you said earlier that I think is so important. I started mentioning it when we lost you for a few minutes, and the idea of figuring out the tranches in the things we own. So the top tranche being those few items that have a very strong emotional attachment. They're family heirlooms, part of our history that we really want to hang on to because there is so much meaning in them, whether they have financial value or not, and figure out what those are. And then the next tranche is of the things that don't fall into this I'm definitely keeping. So are there ones that are valuable, things like sterling silver, like gold? People don't eat off of gold flatware anymore, I don't think, but they're I've seen gold, they're pretty much solid gold, forks and spoons and such, or things like Lalique, glass pieces, china from the post World War II period, made in Japan, that kind of thing, and coin collections, stamp collections, potentially those sort of things. That's the second tranche, and then the third tranche is that which we can give away. We might be able to get a charitable deduction, or just we get the I'm the only word I can come up with is a Yiddish word, the nachas, the good feelings, right, from having done something, whether it's to goodwill or
There's
whether
housing, there's dress for success. There's so many different. Yes, nachis does actually every once in a while a Yiddish word just it
right,
it up. That's at Korean, it just sums it up. Nachis sums it up. Yeah, the good of giving back, the good of helping somebody that maybe lost their home for whatever reason and they need to rebuild. So think about how great that feels that you're not spending, X amount of money on a storage unit, or worse, giving your children the responsibility of getting rid of it, but being preemptive to that. Be really the most important.
and I'll give you just a small example of where this happened. When I was deployed in 2011 on the USS Ronald Reagan, so we were the first ship on the scene after the earthquake and tsunami that followed the nuclear reactor meltdown in Japan, and people had lost in literally everything. In many cases, they had no food, no water, no clothing. It had all been wiped out, and we had a ship of about 4,200 people. 80 or 90% of them were 25 years old or younger, and were stuck in the ship because there was a radioactive plume. So we couldn't be out on the deck doing whatever. We weren't running flight operations, and these young people were just beside themselves. They wanted to help, but you know, we were on the ship, and so we came up with the idea to organize a clothing drive. And all of these, well, no, not all of them, but many of these young sailors went through their their bag that they would bring on, their sea bag, and find clothing that they had brought on deployment, that in fact they really didn't need. And we put together these big, huge boxes of clothing, box after box after box of clothing. And mind you, when you come to a Navy ship, it's not like you're bringing a whole lot of stuff,
I
right?
would
You're bringing a couple of sea bags and maybe a suitcase, and yet we still found box after box after box of stuff to donate to our Japanese friends, allies, whatever you want to call them, who had nothing, and they needed clothing for themselves, their children, etc. And the outpouring of donation was really heartwarming. It was just tremendous. They also bought out every piece of clothing, in the ship store, and donated that as well. But I mean, that was a small percentage overall of what was donated. So I think there is something in certainly the younger generation gets maligned, and I think undeservedly so. There is a sense in them of wanting to really do something, have an impact, and I, much of what we talked about, I think, relates to that just because a relative has passed away, we don't have to keep all of their stuff to honor them. We can honor them by moving it on to someone else who can use it better. It may be something that's not monetarily valuable, but may have a great deal of academic value, maybe some, manuscripts or something like that a university would put into their permanent collection on a particular writer. Could be something like that where it's even just a few pieces, or it could be, something much larger. So these are the kind of things I know that you can help people with. And I think that's why, especially when there's a lot of stuff, it really, you're saying that you're 90% counselor, that's a lot of it is helping people see where can I really, derive value from this process that doesn't necessarily mean keeping all these things.
Absolutely, and that's an incredible experience that you have, Kevin. But and what I loved about the story, all of it, and then the sea bags. Like you can only take so many items onto a ship. I mean, I can only imagine, even if you're taking a luxury cruise, you still don't have room in your cabin. So when you're on, I mean, it's the truth. And I think about my carry-on bags. That's how my children and I travel on airplanes, only carry-on, and that really, even in itself, if you go on a trip for 7 days and if you have a washer dryer, you don't wear what you've taken with you in a carry-on bag. And if you're going on a ship and you have these sea bags and you're still finding items, I mean, imagine how streamlined we really can be.
Mhm.
And that, again, it's part of the story of stuff in the Uncluttered book. And the reason why, people work with me, it's just exactly that. And giving somebody the ability to say it's okay. Yes, you touched on that, and if you want to, we can probably end with that idea that you still preserve the memory of someone, even though you don't hold on to everything. And again, I lost my father 2 years ago, and it was the same idea of what do my kids want? My kids want, his ballpoint pens, his felt tip, something like that, a lovely fountain pen, a tie, but ties don't look the same as they did. My father, we called him the mayor of Madison Avenue, always dressed up every day. But my 21-year-old he'll take a couple, but but then you have to go and you have to alter the ties, like as you said, alter the clothing. Back to that one for 1 second, but it's very true. It's like when you really look at something, or you have me there next to you and my team, and they've all been trained by me, and they have that same wonderful empathy. I like to think that we all walk in and we say, okay, what do you really, really need to keep? And I've never had anybody have any sort of remorse. I mean, a month later, 2 months later, 6 months later, it's they're spreading to friends, and they're not saying I'm sorry I let something go. When I'm not sure and I'm really on the fence, so okay, then keep it, and I can come back in a month. And
Mhm.
we can take it then, and we either resell it or we can donate it at that. But it's a process that we do with utter and absolute transparency. And that's, again, part of the joy of what it is that I do. I see how happy people are when they're done working with Uncluttered.
Very good. All right. Well, just if you'll hang tight with me, I'm just going to do a quick wrap up, and then we'll talk offline. So, first of all, Hillary, thank you so much for being on the show today, and Robin, who is off screen. Robin, thank you for also chiming in and opening up your shop to Hillary. It's terrific to see. I just love seeing these kind of beautiful things. So next time I'm in New York, I'm going to have to come by and just
For
you know
having
yeah, absolutely. So, real
Kevin.
quickly, coming up tomorrow at 10 a.m. Tuesday Pacific time is my show, Business Lessons from the Military. And I'm going to be talking about Washington at the Battle of Yorktown. This, of course, was the last major military confrontation in the American War for Independence. And there are some terrific lessons as business people and professionals that we can learn from how Washington ended up winning that battle. It was not a foregone conclusion. So I invite you to tune in on Tuesday, tomorrow at 10 a.m. And then on Wednesday at 10 a.m. is my show, People Making Money. And I'm going to be doing Taxes Affect You and the Economy, Part 2. So for those of you who saw Part 1, which was back in July, we covered a number of different types of taxes. This time we're going to cover capital gains taxes and excise taxes and tariffs. And how do these affect us as individuals, how they work their way through the economy. And then this week is my every other week show on Thursday at 5 p.m. Pacific time, Jiggers' Place, where we sit back, we have a cocktail, and we talk about all the things that aren't related to business and professions. And on this coming Thursday, again at 5 p.m. Pacific, I'm going to be talking about a book that my daughter asked me to read. I had heard about it, but I had never read it. It's called Flowers for Algernon. It's a classic book from, I believe it was written in the 1960s. A fascinating book. When my daughter told me, you have to read this book, Daddy, I was kind of like, yeah, talk to the hand kind of thing. And then I bought 2 copies, one for me and one for her. And I decided, well, I want to be a good example to my daughter and show her that I really care about her opinion. I picked the book up. I could not put it down. It is a wonderful book. So I'm looking forward to having a cocktail with you and talking about Flowers for Algernon on Thursday afternoon as we head into the end of the week. So thank you so much for joining us today. Really appreciate you viewing as always. If you're not a subscriber to the show, please do consider subscribing. That way you'll know every time that a show is getting ready to air. And in fact, just real quickly, since Hillary's with me, we're going to be doing another show on October 28th and a third show in our series on November 18th. So become a subscriber so you can see Hillary every time she's on the show. I know she dresses the place up. You got to look at this. Not so good, but I mean, wow, right? So Hillary, thanks again for joining us today. Fantastic advice that you give us. And signing off, as I always do, Marie, darling, you are my bell. Courage at all times, my friends.